So first day, normal schedule here with Baltimore. Any questions?
Sean, just full film, what impressed you about how the Ravens utilize both Lamar and Derek in the run game?
Yeah, look. So anytime the quarterback's a run threat, you kind of get a man back offensively. It's not 10 versus 11, and then when you have a real good running back, that makes it real difficult. And so these guys have been rushing it extremely well, throwing it extremely well, scoring. And then I would say from a complementary football standpoint, they're defending the run well. They've gotten teams in a number of the games they've played this year into a one-dimensional game, and that's with scoring. So this is one of those teams, obviously, that we've seen in the postseason and playing late in the postseason for a reason. John does a great job. He has for a number of years.
They're number one in the league in total offense. You're number 3 in total defense. Is this almost like something's got to give matchup, and you feel your defense is up to the challenge?
Yeah, look, it's still a team game. Each aspect of it's important. If we're not on the field long, there's more stress on the defense, and vice versa. And so, yeah, I mean, look, that's one matchup that you're discussing, and obviously, it starts, but it just doesn't end with their running game. They're throwing the ball very well down the field, and their red zone numbers are at the top of the league. So there's a lot more than just that one element, but of course that's an element.
Obviously, Reynolds' injury affected your rotation receiver a little bit, but what have you liked the last few weeks with Devon and Troy getting sort of more playing?
Well, look, those are young players that are growing right in front of our eyes. Just like we talk a lot about Bo's growth, but there's other younger players that are getting experience, and I think that's important, and they've handled it well.
You talked about those bigger games on the schedule. When you have games like that, obviously Kansas City's on the backside of, are they measuring sticks for you as a coach to where your team is and the growth?
They can be. Part of it is it kind of leads you off into the distance of where, as the season progresses, obviously the games begin to gain more significance, and but certainly this will be our toughest challenge to date by far, and this is a real good football team. So, getting back to last week, we're not going to be able to afford a few of those errors against a good team like this.
You talked about good teams win at home, good teams win on the road, but what have you liked about the team's focus? I think 3 consecutive road wins coming out fast.
I think that, ultimately, we've talked about playing well at home, but ultimately to get to where you want to go, the better teams are able to travel and have success as well. And so, we'll go out Friday later on. There is an hour time change Sunday where we fall back. And so, it's preparation, recovery, rest, and that process has already begun.
Coach, you mentioned those mistakes in last week's game, specifically with the wide receiver fumbles. Are those concentration issues, or how do you improve those?
I think more focus relative to, for instance, LJ's. There's a point at which the ride's over, and you have to know that. In other words, that extra 2 yards that you're fighting for, I'm looking at 30 plays that I've got ready to call. So you have to know when the ride's over. Cortland's was a little different, obviously, catching it real close to the. So each one can be different, but it's just that that understanding. These guys have forced fumbles at a high rate, and so that's an important statistic as it relates to a game like this.
Does the way that you message that after you have a position group with 2 fumbles change because it's guys that have played a lot of football for you and in general?
No, I think look, you're always trying to approach it prior to, in other words, for young players coming into the league, it's different the way teams take the ball away, and so you try to deal with it before you have that crisis moment, and so, and then, man, we coach it, how are you handling the ball in traffic, not in traffic, and it eventually has to become a habit, and so I think it's coaching, it's practice, it's technique, it's all of those things.
Sean, when you're evaluating players, whether it's before the draft or in veteran free agency, how much goes into determining how well players can accept hard coaching or can be coached thoroughly and are willing to kind of accept this? How much?
Yeah, I think, well, it kind of gets back to makeup, because not every player, I think one of the things that we try to do as coaches is there's some players that I might coach differently than others relative to the challenge, and I'm very aware of that. In other words, based on their makeup, and so, and then others that I know can handle it, but I think I don't look at that in the evaluation process, but I look at the mental toughness, intelligence, those traits that make that other part pretty easy.
Sean, when you drafted Bo, you talked about 61 games in college, so it wasn't like a moment rookie. Does that manifest itself on days other than game day?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's very much routine driven. He's, of course, he's married, and so aside from game day, his schedule here, film, I think he's further along. And again, I think I said this after the draft process. We viewed it as a plus that he had that experience, and we also viewed the adversity that he had early on, that he came back from. You've seen that with a handful of these guys now. And yet that can be the story of a number of players that may not be good enough. And so it's, in other words, that was a plus, but the accuracy, the arm strength, the arm talent, the location, he runs a little better than I expected. That's because he didn't run for us. We didn't get a time or shuttle, but I think that, I think that manifests itself throughout the week.
As you get in, obviously the trade deadline I think is a week away. When you think about dealing, you have positions, obviously maybe some are thinner or stronger. Do you think about trading from a position of depth, or as a coach, are you always worried about having enough depth to get through?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's so much attention, obviously, that gets focused around the trade deadline, and I think any GM, everyone's picking the phone up, and there's discussions, and yet any decision or move that a team would make, not just us, would be with the best interest of the team that's making a deal, acquiring or trading. And so our approach look, I said this before, George will come in my office 3 times a day, and twice we might talk about something else, and then once where I'll be down in his office talking. And, yeah, so I think it's that time of the year where you can get an early feel of some. Remember, there's a trade, and then there's the contract involved in the trade, which is the devil in the details with any player. So, but our focus is on this football team right here.
At inside linebacker, you started Quan against the Saints, went back to Justin against the Panthers. What's your thinking on filling that spot?
We go back and forth based on what our package is, and so a lot of it has to do with who we're playing. I mean, a lot of it has to do with what's our personnel. Are we in base? Are we in penny? Are we, and then who are we playing relative to those decisions?
Do you see Quan as a guy that will at some point be on the 53?
Yeah. In other words, we brought in 2 veteran linebackers, and look, the good news is that decision isn't now, but we brought in both those players because they've got a lot of experience. They played at a real high level, and they give us some flexibility. All right, thank you.